Alright everybody, hello. It's Junk Debunk here, and today we're looking at a claim made by Dr. Chaffee, specifically the claim that human insulin was never meant for carbohydrate and only for protein, and that carbohydrate consumption is responsible for tooth decay across the board. These are pretty big claims, bold claims even, and they sound convincing, maybe, if you don't know the underlying physiology. But once you do know, you realize this man's being very, very silly. And perhaps it's a bit scary seeing that he's a doctor, saying such silly things. Let's go. Aha. Okay, let's start with the centerpiece. Dr. Chaffee states the type of insulin our bodies produce is meant for protein, not carbohydrate. And his proof? Are you ready for this? His proof is the fact that fast-acting analogs of insulin, such as NovoRapid, exists. That's his proof. So let's decode that. Here's point one. NovoRapid isn't a different type of insulin. It's actually human insulin with one amino acid swapped. Proline at position B28 is replaced with aspartate, hence the other name insulin aspart. That's it. It's not a new hormone. It's not a new function. It's a single amino acid tweak. And why do they do this? Because injected insulin is slow to absorb through fat tissue. And Dr. Chaffee should know this. So pharmaceutical chemists made it dissolve faster under the skin. This has nothing to do with evolution, and absolutely zero to do with insulin being only for protein, quote-unquote. Which also brings us to point two. Keeping it simple, endogenous insulin already responds to carbs extremely fast. The pancreas that we all have releases insulin within seconds of glucose hitting the bloodstream. To way faster, actually, than any injected version, even the modified ones. You don't need NovoRapid to handle carbs. Pancreas is already way better at it. The point is that with the injection, as we said before, it has to get through the fat, hence the modified version. Now here's a couple of points to counter the logic that Dr. Chaffee's presenting with his statements. Point three would be the body releases insulin differently depending on the substrate. When carbohydrates enter, insulin spikes. And even this varies between individuals. Health status, of course, would also determine how insulin spikes and responds. When protein enters the system, insulin also responds, plus glucagon. That alone disproves the claim. If insulin was solely for protein, we wouldn't need glucagon to counterbalance it every time protein enters the system. And if we go to point four, we look at evolution, it tells the opposite story. Humans evolved high salivary amylase. We've also evolved our subjective preferences for sweets, seasonal honey gathering, and tuber hunting and roasting. Our physiology screams, I metabolize carbohydrates. That's why we have insulin in the first place. Not to mention, as a side note, insulin is not solely for handling carbohydrate. It has other functions, but it's beyond the scope of this video. Okay, so point five, I'd like to turn to the late and great Dr. Ray Peat, who has helped countless individuals, including myself, not only helped me with my health, but inspired and encouraged me to see the world differently, learn new things, learn nutrition better, and help others, which I went on to do. So what he said was protein stimulates insulin, but more strongly than carbohydrates do. The issue isn't insulin, it's the absence of carbohydrate substrate to pair with it. That leads to stress hormones. It's a full-on cascade, one that can even be found in diabetics. Many have misinterpreted this, including Dr. Chaffee, but more importantly, individuals such as Chaffee misinterpret the mechanism as the purpose. So no, we do not produce a special protein insulin, and NovoRapid does not prove that. Evolution does not support it, and physiology outright contradicts it. But let's move on now. He also claims confidently that carbohydrates and sugar absolutely cause tooth decay. Let's go. So here's our question for section 2. Do carbs and sugar cause tooth decay? Well, first, let me just point some simple things out. Indeed, in the 19th century, sugar was not even viewed as a villain in medical texts, such as the United States dispensatory. Instead, it was seen as a benign, even therapeutic and useful substance. According to some historical sources from the era, for example, such as Medicinal Plants in 1880 by Bentley and Tryman, reflected prevailing 19th century views, and so sugar was generally considered sort of nutritious even, though incapable of sustaining life alone due to lack of nitrogen. But that's where quality protein comes in, right? It acted as a good, clean source of fuel. And I especially like the view of so-called simple sugars from, again, Dr. Pete, keeping this metabolic fire, so to speak, going strong, to also metabolize fat safely. Now remember, the framing is good nutritious foods, good quality proteins, with the supports of good clean carbohydrates. Now the second point here, it was medicinally useful. It was used for soothing coughs, especially in lozenges or sugar candy, even indicated for exposure to poisons and venom. Physicians from England as well as France recognized that allowing their patients who were wasting away and dying from what they now know as diabetes, that could have, contrary to popular belief, caused by long bouts of fasting or basic starvation, or even exposures to early renditions of unsaturated fats. Whatever amount of sugar these patients wanted, along with a normal diet of lean proteins, not only did these doctors save them from dying, but the patients put weight back on and regained their health. As a third point, it was seen as a powerful antiseptic, commonly used to preserve meats and fruits. While the first edition of the United States dispensatory from 1852 primarily focused on botanical remedies and did not emphasize sugar for therapeutic use, other contemporary medicinal references confirm that sugar was regarded as medically neutral or even beneficial, not harmful. It was widely used as a vehicle for medicines, creating syrups and tinctures because of its palatability as well as its natural preservative qualities. Thus, sugar and carbs in general were not demonized in 19th century medicine. Instead, they were valued for practical as well as mild medicinal roles. And as the old adage goes, from the 19th and 20th century scientists and biologists alike, fat burns in the flame of carbohydrate. They started to understand that you need oxaloacetate, which is formed from the breakdown of carbohydrates, to better metabolize fats. Now, it wasn't until the end of the 19th century and early 20th century where seed oil manufacturers had an overabundance of their stock, of their inventory, because synthetic oils were being made for industrial use, and those manufacturers strategized to get their seed oils into food. And so the campaign began against carbohydrate and sugars that early on. And little by little, the publication started turning on the idea of sugar and carbohydrate. It's really no different than modern time, where the sicknesses that arise from foods that contain sugar are solely blamed on sugar, and not the fat content or other detrimental ingredients. So, we go to point 1. Sugar does not directly damage enamel. Sugar does not melt enamel. It's actually inert against tooth tissue. What does cause decay is acid from certain bacteria, or acid in general. But those bacteria only create acid in the first place if saliva is low, oral pH is low, mineral status is poor, fat solubles are low, especially D and K2, inefficient self-cleaning environment due to dry mouth, as seen from above variables, but also general cell turnover due to low metabolism. The microbiome is imbalanced, or one of the biggest culprits could be at play, which is polyunsaturated fat-driven inflammation, reducing repair capacity, enzyme function, and general repair. Phytic acid from inappropriately prepared and poorly cooked grain-based or bean or legume type carbs. But if you notice one thing, None of these are directly about sugar or carbohydrate. Now, if we go to point 2, we can look quickly at Weston A. Price, as he absolutely torpedoes the carbs cause decay claim. Based on his research, he showed traditional cultures thrived on fruit, tubers, honey, roots, even porridges, all with perfect teeth, wide-in jaws, thick enamel. They ate carbs, and lots of them. What they didn't have were polyunsaturated fats and oils, nutrient dilution, refined flours, and this again is more due to displacement of nutrients, not necessarily if one eats some refined flour. Low vitamin D, A, K2, low minerals, chronic inflammation, lack of adequate sun exposure. Those are the key differences. On to point 3, we touched on proper grain preparation. And these types of things, grains, beans, legumes, you name it, they're fine when they're prepared the traditional way and cooked thoroughly. They should be soaked, fermented, sprouted, or nixtamalized. These remove anti-nutrients that block mineral and vitamin absorption, but they also expose and make more accessible the inherent nutrients of those things. Overall, at a high mineral, nutrient-dense, high calcium, high fat-soluble vitamin diet, and with little to no PUFA, well-prepared grains cause zero dental issues. Polyunsaturated fats being the silent destroyer. If Chaffee wants a food category that actually sets up decay, it's PUFA. If you want other things to set up decay, it's toxins, poisons, and other detriments that are in the food supply now or in the environment, or from, sadly, pharmaceuticals. But if we focus on PUFA, they lower thyroid function, they lower saliva, they alter mouth pH, they disrupt microbiome, they ruin or interfere with enzymatic action, protein synthesis, they slow enamel repair. Sugar in a low PUFA, high mineral diet is completely different from sugar in a modern inflammatory diet. This is, after all, how sugar has become the fall guy, a scapegoat. Everyone ignoring all the other things in food supply because of the brainwashing, and have dedicated themselves to attacking sugar. Moving on to point 5, we touched on earlier, evolutionary mismatch. Humans evolved around fruit and honey. Decay became a major issue mainly after these industrial oils we speak of, industrial flours, again, because of displacement or total negligence of counterpart food that would contain actual nutrients, not from eating some refined flour itself, but mineral-poor and vitamin-poor diets, processed foods, chemicals, and such that would damage teeth, let alone other tissues of the body. Okay, let's also quickly cover insulin response variability. This point totally undermines the entire "our insulin is for protein" claim made by Chaffee. People show huge individual variation in insulin response to carb and protein. Some individuals get a large insulin spike from the same carbohydrate load. Some a barely spike at all. Some spike more to protein, others less. This proves two things. The insulin molecule isn't different. The organism's physiology is. The organism's health status is. Their metabolic status differs. And point 2, insulin's role is universal, but the degree of response is affected by some genetics, mostly metabolic rate, thyroid function, gut integrity, stress hormones, and liver glycogen. None of that supports a protein-only insulin. It supports human metabolic diversity paired with one general-purpose insulin system. If the insulin were for protein by design, we would not see such diversity. But because insulin is flexible and a metabolic regulator, it's used to handle carbohydrates, protein, stress, and substrate shifts. Biological diversity proves the insulin system is versatile, not specialized for protein. So, to wrap it up, human insulin is not just for protein. It's a central part of carbohydrate metabolism. Protein happens to stimulate it as well. You can either have the substrate to satisfy that stimulation, or you can remain in the chasing cycle Or worse, use your protein as fuel, which is not good. Nova Rapid isn't evidence of evolutionary intent, but rather it's evidence of pharmaceutical engineering. And this is to overcome the subcutaneous challenge. Dr. Chaffee should know this. Tooth decay is not solely caused by carbs. It's caused by context. Minerals, saliva, pH, microbiome, and especially PUFA all have a role. Remove PUFA, restore minerals, eat nutritious food, and carbs are not the enemy. Even simple sugar. They're the metabolic ally. They fuel the fire. So, if this video helped you see the physiology a little clearer, drop a like, maybe share it, leave a comment. If you have questions, ask in the comment section. Maybe I'll break this down or these ideas down a little further at some point, because more context is good, and nuance matters. And honestly, biology makes way more sense when you're not at war with actual food.